My name is Hallie, and I need to tell you about the Christmas that didn't just break my heart. It shattered every illusion I'd been living under for 31 years. This is the story of how I discovered that sometimes the people who claim to love you the most are the ones slowly bleeding you dry, and how one phone call on a rainy December night finally gave me the courage to choose myself. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, if you've ever wondered why you're the one everyone calls when they need something, but never when they just want to talk, if you've ever felt like you're performing for love that should be freely given, this story is for you. Picture this: December 23rd, 2024, Seattle. Rain hammering my apartment windows like bullets while I stood in my kitchen, still wearing scrubs that reeked of antiseptic and heartbreak. I'd just finished the kind of shift that reminds you why they call it practicing medicine. 14 hours straight, 3 families saying goodbye to beloved pets, and one miracle recovery that made it all worthwhile. A senior beagle named Copper had come in barely breathing, and after 6 hours of intensive care, he'd wagged his tail for his crying owner. Those moments, when you literally hold life and death in your hands, they change you. But despite the bone-deep exhaustion, my heart was fluttering with anticipation. Christmas was in 2 days, and this year felt different. This year, I was determined to get it right. My burgundy suitcase sat by the door like a faithful friend, packed with weeks of careful preparation. I'd hunted down my stepfather Robert's favorite imported olive tapenade from a specialty shop in Pike Place Market, the same brand his mother used to serve when he was a kid. For my sister, Emma, I'd commissioned a local artist to create a custom piece featuring her beloved rescue cat, Moonbeam. For my mother, I'd bought the expensive German arthritis cream her insurance refused to cover, the one that actually worked, but cost $300 a tube. Every gift was chosen with surgical precision, tailored to show them I really saw them, really knew them. I even had backup gifts hidden in my closet, just in case the primaries didn't land right. Because getting Christmas right mattered to me more than I want to admit. It was my annual chance to prove I belonged at their table, that I deserved the love I'd been chasing my entire life. You see, I've been the family's invisible ATM for so long that I'd forgotten what it felt like to be anything else. It started innocently enough when I was 15, Mom crying over a stack of bills after Dad left, and me offering my babysitting money to help with groceries. The grateful hug she gave me that day was like mainlining validation. Suddenly, I mattered. I was useful. I was needed. That pattern followed me like a shadow through high school, where I worked at a veterinary clinic after school, while Emma got to focus on her artistic development. Translation: painting her nails and posting moody selfies on social media. Through college, where I worked 3 jobs while she got a monthly allowance for living expenses that somehow always included music festival tickets and expensive coffee. Through veterinary school, where I took out extra loans not just for my education, but to help when Robert lost his job at Boeing, and they faced foreclosure on the house where all our family memories lived. By the time I graduated and started making real money as a vet, the pattern was so established that nobody questioned when I quietly took over their mortgage, their car payments, their emergency expenses. I thought I was being a good daughter, a loving sister. What I didn't realize was that I was slowly erasing myself, becoming nothing more than a financial life support system for people who'd learned to see my bank account before they saw me. The math was staggering when I finally calculated it 2 years ago during a sleepless night. Over 8 years, I'd given them $847 iron dollars, $847,000. That was a house. That was my retirement. That was my future, freely given to people who somehow always needed just a little more. But tonight felt different. Tonight, I was going to show up not as their safety net, but as their daughter, their sister. I was going to walk into that house in Bellevue with nothing but love and carefully chosen gifts. And we were going to have the kind of Christmas I'd been dreaming about since I was old enough to understand that some families actually enjoyed being together. My phone buzzed as I was adding a final touch to my suitcase, a handwritten note for each family member, telling them what they meant to me. Emma's name lit up my screen, and I answered with genuine joy bubbling in my voice. Em, perfect timing. I was just finishing packing. Traffic's going to be insane tomorrow, but I should be there by... Hallie. Her voice had that careful tone, the one people use when they're about to tell you your dog died but want to sound gentle about it. We need to talk. The excitement in my chest crystallized into something cold and sharp. What's wrong? Is Mom okay? Did something happen to Robert? Everyone's fine. It's just... Marcus is coming for Christmas. Marcus. The name landed like a stone in still water, sending ripples of dread through my system. Emma's boyfriend of 8 months, the self-proclaimed energy healer, who claimed he could see auras and insisted that my profession made me spiritually contaminated. The same Marcus who'd left our last family dinner after I'd mentioned euthanizing a suffering horse, claiming that my death energy was disrupting his chakras and giving him nightmares. This was the man who'd convinced my free-spirited artist sister that veterinarians were basically psychic vampires, draining the life force from the universe one peaceful goodbye at a time. Okay, I said carefully, my therapist's advice about staying calm echoing in my head. That's nice. I'm looking forward to getting to know him better. The pause that followed was long enough for me to count my heartbeats. 1, 2, 3, 4. Here's the thing, Hallie. You know how sensitive Marcus is to negative energies, and with your job, all the death you deal with, all the sick animals. It's really affecting him. He's been having nightmares ever since Thanksgiving, when you told that story about the German shepherd with cancer. He says you carry the accumulated trauma of every animal you couldn't save. I sat down on my couch so hard I bounced. This was the same sister who used to call me crying at 2 a.m. during college, begging me to tell her happy animal stories when she couldn't sleep. The same Emma who'd insisted I become a vet in the first place because I had a gift for healing. Emma, what exactly are you saying? I could hear her take a shaky breath. We've all talked about it. Me, Mom, Robert, even Marcus. And we think it would be better if you skipped Christmas this year, just this once. It's nothing personal. Hallie, it's just that Marcus is going through this really intense spiritual awakening, and he needs to be surrounded by pure, positive energy right now. The words hit me like a physical blow. I actually looked down at my chest, expecting to see blood. You're uninviting me from Christmas because your boyfriend thinks I'm spiritually toxic. Don't be dramatic. It's just one Christmas. You can start your own traditions. Maybe do some energy cleansing. Work on releasing all that accumulated death energy. Marcus knows this great shaman in Sedona who does remote healings. My phone was already buzzing with another call, Robert's name on the screen. My stepfather, the man who'd walked me down the aisle at my veterinary school graduation when my biological father was too busy with his new family to show up. M. Robert's calling. Let me. Actually, he asked me to conference him in. He wanted to talk to you too. The call merged, and suddenly Robert's familiar voice filled my ear, though it sounded different somehow. Distant, formal. Hallie, sweetheart, Emma filled you in about Marcus joining us? She did. Good, good. Listen, kiddo, we just want a peaceful Christmas. You know how things can get intense when you're around. All those heavy stories from work. The way you get when you're stressed about difficult cases. We just think it might be better if you took some time for yourself this year. Maybe do some self-care, work on processing all that trauma you carry. Intense. There was that word again. I thought about all the Christmas dinners where I'd sat quietly while Emma dominated conversation with tales of her latest artistic breakthrough or spiritual revelation. All the times I'd bitten my tongue when she announced another career change, from pottery to jewelry making to life coaching to crystal healing. While my steady, successful veterinary practice was somehow evidence that I was too rigid and afraid of growth. I remembered being 14 and winning the regional science fair with a project on animal behavior, only to have the family celebration dinner canceled because Emma had a headache from studying too hard for a test she'd ultimately skip. But when Emma sold her first piece of jewelry on Etsy for $35 3 years later, they threw her a party with a homemade banner and invited half the neighborhood. Robert, I said quietly, what happens if I come anyway? The pause was deafening. Then, in a voice I'd never heard from him before, Hallie, honey, I think you know we can't have conflict on Christmas. If you show up uninvited, we might not be able to answer the door. It's nothing personal. We just need to protect our peace. Nothing personal. The phrase echoed in my head like a gunshot in an empty church. I hung up without saying goodbye and sat in the growing darkness of my apartment, staring at my packed suitcase, at the carefully wrapped gifts, at the family photos where I was always slightly off to the side, always the one having to be called back into the frame. The weight of their words settled over me, but instead of suffocating me, it brought an unexpected clarity. And that's when something inside me didn't just crack, it exploded, but not into tears or rage or the dramatic breakdown you might expect. Instead, it was like a dam bursting, releasing a flood of crystal-clear understanding that swept away years of carefully constructed delusions. I walked to my laptop with hands steadier than they had been in years and opened my banking app. What my family didn't know, what they'd never bothered to ask about, was exactly how much of their comfortable lifestyle depended on my invisible support. The $14 or $500 monthly mortgage payment I'd been covering for 3 years after Robert's layoff? Canceled. The fundelsers saw $800 monthly transfer to Emma's account for her Seattle apartment and creative expenses? Canceled. The $800 monthly payment for Mom's car lease? Canceled. The emergency fund that had paid for Robert's root canal, Emma's trip to Bali for artistic inspiration, and Mom's new wardrobe after she gained weight from her medication? Access revoked. The joint credit card I'd added them to for emergencies that somehow always included Emma's monthly therapy sessions with her life coach and Mom's subscription boxes, frozen. The life insurance policy naming them as beneficiaries changed. The college fund I'd been building for Emma to finish her degree someday transferred to my retirement account. With each click, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. the lightness of not carrying other people's lives on my shoulders. But I wasn't done. I opened my contacts and scrolled to a number I'd been avoiding for months. Dr. Sarah Chen, my former colleague who'd left Seattle to open a specialized practice in San Diego, had been trying to recruit me for her team. The offer was still on the table: more money, better hours, and 3,000 miles between me and the family that had just disinvited me from Christmas for the crime of saving lives. I typed a text. "Sarah, is that position still available? I'm ready to talk." Her response came back in under 2 minutes. "OMG, yes. When can you start? I've been hoping you'd change your mind." As I sat there in my quiet apartment, rain still drumming against the windows like nature's applause, I calculated the true cost of my family's love over 8 years. I'd given them $847,000. $847,000. Enough to buy a house, enough to fund my own retirement, enough to travel the world, start my own practice, live any life I wanted. Instead, I'd given it to people who saw me as a walking ATM with convenient veterinary skills for their pets. I thought about my childhood friend Jessica, who'd always wondered why I seemed so anxious about money, despite having a good job. "You give them everything," she'd said after witnessing Emma casually ask me to pay for her latest artistic endeavor. "What do they give you?" I'd defended them then, insisted that family was family, that love meant sacrifice. But sitting there in the dark, I finally understood what Jessica had seen years ago. Love doesn't require you to set yourself on fire to keep other people warm. Real love doesn't make you prove your worth over and over again. Real love doesn't come with a price tag. Real love doesn't uninvite you from Christmas because your profession makes someone's boyfriend uncomfortable. I stood up, walked to my Christmas tree, and unplugged the lights. I gathered the carefully wrapped gifts and carried them to my closet, their bright paper suddenly looking absurd in the context of my newfound clarity. Then I opened a bottle of wine I'd been saving for a special occasion. Because this was a special occasion. It was the night I stopped performing for love and started demanding it. As I sat by my window, watching Seattle's lights blur through the rain, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Genuine peace, not the forced calm of someone swallowing their hurt to keep the peace, but the deep serenity of someone who'd finally stopped trying to fit into a space that was never meant for them. My phone had been buzzing with texts from Emma, explanations, justifications, and finally bargaining. Maybe Marcus could stay at a hotel, or read the latest one. We could do a shorter celebration. I didn't respond. Some conversations don't deserve to be had. Instead, I opened my laptop and started researching San Diego neighborhoods, veterinary practices, and the cost of living in a city where nobody would expect me to fund their lifestyle while being grateful for whatever scraps of attention they threw my way. Outside, the rain was turning to snow, and I watched the flakes drift past my window like 1,000 tiny surrenders, each one giving up its individual journey to become part of something larger, something peaceful. For the first time in my adult life, I understood what it felt like to choose myself. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of a war I'd never seen coming. Christmas morning arrived gray and silent, like the world itself was holding its breath. I woke up in my own bed for the first Christmas in 15 years, and instead of the guilt I'd expected to feel, there was only this strange, weightless peace. It felt like floating after years of carrying anvils. I made myself coffee, the expensive kind I usually saved for special occasions, and sat by my window watching Seattle wake up. Families were probably gathering around Christmas trees right now, exchanging gifts and making memories. Somewhere across town, my family was doing the same thing without me, and for the first time in my life, that felt like their loss, not mine. My phone had been buzzing intermittently since 6 a.m. with texts from Emma, but I hadn't looked at them. Some boundaries, once drawn, need to be respected immediately, or they become suggestions instead of laws. Around noon, my building's intercom buzzed. I almost ignored it. I wasn't expecting anyone, and the last thing I wanted was some well-meaning neighbor asking why I wasn't with family on Christmas. But something made me answer. Hallie? It's Dr. Martinez from the clinic. I'm so sorry to bother you on Christmas, but we have an emergency situation. Dr. Elena Martinez was the senior partner at our practice, a woman I respected immensely. She never called unless it was truly critical. Of course. What's happening? A family just brought in their golden retriever. He got into the chocolate stash under their Christmas tree. The dog is in critical condition, and... She paused. They specifically asked for you. Apparently, you saved their neighbor's cat last month, and they trust you completely. I know it's Christmas, but I'll be there in 20 minutes. As I drove through the empty Seattle streets, I realized something profound. This was exactly where I belonged. Not sitting around a table with people who saw me as an inconvenience, but here, using my skills to save lives that actually mattered to me. The golden retriever's name was Charlie, and he was in bad shape. Chocolate toxicity in dogs can be fatal, especially when they've consumed as much as Charlie had. His family, a young couple with 2 small children, was beside themselves. Please, the woman kept saying, tears streaming down her face. He's all we have. We can't afford to lose him, too. I looked closer and realized why they'd seemed familiar. This was the Wilson family. I'd met them at the food bank where I volunteered on weekends. They were struggling financially. Had been for months since the husband lost his job. Getting Charlie to the emergency clinic on Christmas Day had probably cost them money they didn't have. For the next 6 hours, I worked to save Charlie's life. IV fluids, activated charcoal, constant monitoring. The family stayed the entire time, taking turns holding their children who didn't understand why Charlie was so sick. Around 8 p.m., Charlie finally lifted his head and wagged his tail. The entire family burst into tears of relief, and Mrs. Wilson grabbed my hands. "Thank you," she whispered. "You saved our Christmas. You saved our family." Walking to my car that night, I felt more fulfilled than I had in years. This was what using my gifts looked like. Not funding someone else's lifestyle while being told I was too intense, but literally saving lives for people who genuinely appreciated what I could do. My phone had 17 missed calls. I finally listened to the voicemails as I sat in my car outside the clinic. The first few were from Emma, progressively more frantic. "Hallie, where are you? Marcus is asking questions about why you're not here. Call me back." Then came Robert's voice, tight with something I'd never heard before. Panic. "Hallie, we need to talk. There's been some kind of mistake with the mortgage payment. The bank called. Call me immediately." The next voicemail was my mother, her voice shrill with anxiety. "Hallie, what have you done? The car payment bounced. My credit card was declined at the grocery store. People are staring. Call me right now." By the 15th voicemail, Emma was crying. "Hallie, please, I don't understand what's happening. My rent check bounced. My landlord is threatening eviction. Mom is having a panic attack. Robert keeps asking what we did wrong. Please, just call us back. We can fix this. Whatever we did, we can fix it. But it was the 17th voicemail that changed everything. A voice I didn't recognize. Older, refined, curious. Hello, this message is for Dr. Hallie Morrison. My name is Catherine Blackwood. I'm calling because I was at your family's Christmas gathering today. I'm dating Emma's art teacher, Michael. I hope you don't mind, but I couldn't help overhearing some rather interesting conversations about you. I'm a journalist for the Seattle Times, and I'd very much like to speak with you. There seems to be quite a story here about family dynamics and financial exploitation. Please call me back at your earliest convenience. My blood turned to ice. A journalist, at their Christmas dinner, who had overheard interesting conversations about me. I sat in that parking lot for 20 minutes, trying to process what this meant. Catherine Blackwood. I knew that name. She was an investigative journalist who specialized in stories about financial abuse and family dysfunction. She'd won awards for her series on elder financial abuse and had recently done a piece on adult children who financially exploit their parents. Now she wanted to talk to me about my family. My phone rang. Emma's name flashed on the screen, and for the first time all day, I answered. Hallie, thank God. We need to talk. There's been some kind of... I know exactly what happened. Emma, I canceled all the financial support. Silence. Then, quietly, what do you mean, canceled? I mean, I stopped paying for your lives, the mortgage, the car payments, your rent, the credit cards, all of it. I'm done. You can't just... Hallie, we depend on that money. We've structured our entire lives around me funding them while being told I'm too intense to spend Christmas with you. Another pause. Then Emma's voice, smaller now. It's not like that. We love you. We just thought, who's Catherine Blackwood? The silence that followed was deafening. Emma, who is Catherine Blackwood? She's Michael's girlfriend. She came to dinner. She seemed really interested in our family dynamics, asking lots of questions about how we all support each other financially and emotionally. She was particularly curious about you after she heard us talking about why you weren't there. And what exactly did you tell her? Nothing bad. Just that you were going through a difficult time, that your job was affecting your mental health, that we were trying to protect you from stressful family situations. Robert might have mentioned that you've been our main financial support, but only because she asked directly about how we manage expenses with his unemployment. I closed my eyes. They'd painted me as mentally unstable and financially responsible for their lifestyle to a journalist. To an investigative journalist who specialized in financial exploitation stories. Hallie, she wants to write about us, about our family. She says it's a beautiful story about how families can support each other through difficult times. She wants to interview all of us. Did it occur to any of you to call me before talking to a journalist about my private finances and mental health? We didn't think. That's the problem. Emma, you never think. About me, about consequences, about anyone but yourselves. I hung up and immediately called Catherine Blackwood. She answered on the first ring, as if she'd been waiting. Dr. Morrison, thank you so much for calling me back. I was hoping we could meet for coffee tomorrow. I have to tell you, your family story is fascinating from a sociological perspective. What exactly did they tell you? Well, That's what I'd like to discuss with you. From what I gathered, you've been essentially funding their lifestyle for years while dealing with significant work-related trauma. They seem to believe they're protecting you by managing your social interactions and creating buffer zones during family gatherings. It's a really interesting case study in how families can both support and potentially exploit each other, often without realizing it. The way she said, without realizing it, told me she knew exactly what was happening. Ms. Blackwood, I need to be very clear about something. I did not consent to any of this information being shared with a journalist. My family had no right to discuss my finances or mental health with you. Of course, of course, which is why I wanted to speak directly with you. Dr. Morrison, I've been investigating financial exploitation within families for over a decade. What your family described to me today, however well-intentioned they believe it to be, fits a very specific pattern. You have every right to tell your side of the story. And if I don't want any story told at all? That's absolutely your choice. But I should mention, your sister Emma was quite vocal about her concerns that you might be experiencing some kind of breakdown. She mentioned that you've recently cut off all financial support and isolated yourself from the family. She's worried about your mental state and suggested that perhaps some kind of intervention might be necessary. The threat was clear. They were going to paint me as mentally unstable to justify their financial dependence and explain away my absence. They were going to use my own generous nature against me, making themselves look like concerned family members dealing with a difficult, possibly dangerous relative. I'll meet with you, I said quietly. Tomorrow. But this conversation stays between us until I decide what I want to share publicly. Absolutely. I'll text you a coffee shop location. Dr. Morrison? For what it's worth. From what I observed today, I think you might be the sanest person in that house. After I hung up, I sat in my car outside the veterinary clinic where I'd just saved a life, where a family had thanked me with genuine tears of gratitude. And I realized that the war I'd sensed coming was already here. My family wasn't just going to accept my financial independence quietly. They were going to fight for their lifestyle, and they were willing to destroy my reputation to do it. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd involved a journalist who specialized in exposing exactly the kind of behavior they'd just demonstrated. As I drove home through the quiet Christmas night, I thought about Charlie the golden retriever, who was probably sleeping peacefully next to a family who loved him unconditionally, who valued his life not for what he could provide, but simply because he existed. For the first time in my adult life, I understood what that felt like, and I was ready to fight for it. The next morning, I woke up to 37 text messages, 12 missed calls, and an email from my bank confirming that several people had attempted to access my accounts overnight using old authorization codes. They'd tried to steal from me. My own family had tried to electronically steal money from my accounts on the day after Christmas. I screenshot everything, forwarded it all to Catherine Blackwood, and then did something I'd never done before. I called a lawyer, because if they wanted a war, I was going to make sure I won it. But first, I had to call Dr. Sarah Chen in San Diego. It was time to start my new life, 3,000 miles away from people who saw me as a financial resource rather than a human being. As I dialed her number, I looked out my window at Seattle's skyline one last time. This city held 15 years of my adult life, but it also held 15 years of being invisible in my own family. It was time to go somewhere I could be seen. The phone rang twice before Sarah picked up. her voice bright with California sunshine. "Hallie, please tell me you're calling with good news." "I'm calling to say yes. When do you need me to start?" "How about yesterday? But seriously, how soon can you get here?" I looked around my apartment, at the Christmas tree still unplugged, at the gifts still hidden in my closet, at the family photos where I was always slightly out of frame. Give me 2 weeks to wrap things up here. And Sarah, thank you for seeing my value when my own family couldn't. Their loss is definitely our gain. Welcome to your new life, Dr. Morrison. As I hung up the phone, I realized that the war my family was starting wasn't really about money at all. It was about control, about keeping me small and grateful and financially dependent on their approval. But they'd forgotten one crucial detail. Wars are won by the side that's willing to sacrifice everything for what they believe in. And I believed in myself for the first time in 31 years. Let them come. The meeting with Catherine Blackwood was scheduled for 10 a.m. at a quiet coffee shop in Capitol Hill. I arrived early, choosing a corner table where I could see the entire room, a habit I'd developed from years of being ambushed by family interventions disguised as casual conversations. Catherine walked in exactly on time, and I recognized her immediately from her byline photos. Mid-50s, silver hair pulled back in a neat bun, wearing the kind of understated but expensive clothing that suggested success without flaunting it. Her eyes swept the room with the practiced assessment of someone who'd interviewed both CEOs and whistleblowers. "Dr. Morrison?" She approached with a warm but professional smile. "Thank you so much for meeting with me." As she sat down, I noticed she didn't immediately pull out a recorder or notebook. Instead, she ordered coffee and made small talk about the weather, the neighborhood, the excellent pastries. It was masterful, creating a safe space where someone might feel comfortable sharing their deepest secrets. "Before we begin," I said, cutting through the pleasantries, "I need to understand exactly what my family told you yesterday." Catherine's expression grew more serious. "Of course. Let me be completely transparent." She pulled out a small notebook and flipped through several pages. "According to your sister Emma, you've been the family's primary financial support for several years, covering everything from mortgage payments to personal expenses. She described you as brilliant but troubled, someone who uses financial generosity to control family relationships." The words hit like ice water. She said I use money to control them? She did. She also mentioned that your work with dying animals has made you increasingly depressed and paranoid, that you've become suspicious of anyone who accepts your help. Robert supported this narrative, suggesting that you've been isolating yourself and making increasingly erratic financial decisions. I stared at her, speechless. They hadn't just thrown me under the bus. They'd backed it up and run me over again. "Your mother was particularly concerned about your mental state," Catherine continued gently. "She mentioned that you've been refusing therapy and that the family is considering some form of intervention to get you the help you need." "And what did you think of these explanations?" Catherine leaned back in her chair, and for the first time since sitting down, she smiled. "Dr. Morrison, I've been investigating family financial abuse for 15 years. I've interviewed hundreds of people, both victims and perpetrators. What your family described yesterday was textbook deflection and projection." She opened her laptop and showed me a document. "This is a psychological profile I've been developing based on patterns I've observed in financial exploitation cases. Your family's behavior yesterday checked every single box." The document was titled, Identifying Financial Exploitation in Family Systems, and contained a detailed list of warning signs. Target is described as mentally unstable when they resist financial demands. Family creates narrative where Target's generosity is reframed as control. Attempts to involve outside authority figures to pressure Target into compliance. They're not just taking your money, Catherine said quietly. They're systematically destroying your reputation to ensure you can't stop giving it to them. As I absorbed this, my phone buzzed with a text, then another, then a flood of them. Emma, just talked to Dr. Martinez at your clinic. She's worried about you too. Robert, we've scheduled a family meeting for tonight. You need to be there? Mom, your cousin Janet called. She's concerned about what she's hearing. We need to clear this up. Catherine watched me read the messages, her expression growing darker. They're mobilizing, she said. This is phase 2 of the pattern. When financial pressure doesn't work, they move to social pressure. They'll contact everyone in your life, spreading the narrative that you're mentally unstable and need help. My phone rang. Dr. Martinez. I should take this. I told Catherine. Elena, what's... Hallie, I just had the strangest conversation with your stepfather. He called to express concern about your mental health, suggested that you might be experiencing some kind of breakdown. He asked if I'd noticed any concerning behavior at work. My stomach dropped. What did you tell him? I told him that discussing an employee's mental health with family members would be a HIPAA violation and hung up. But Hallie, what's going on? This doesn't sound like the family you've described. Elena, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Have you ever seen any signs that I'm mentally unstable or unfit to practice? The pause was brief but telling. Hallie, you're one of the most competent, compassionate veterinarians I've ever worked with. If anything, my concern has always been that you work too hard and give too much of yourself. The idea that you're mentally unstable is absolutely ridiculous. Would you be willing to put that in writing? Of course. What's happening? I'll explain later. But Elena? If anyone else from my family calls asking about me, please document the conversation and don't share any information about my work or behavior. After I hung up, Catherine was typing rapidly on her laptop. This is escalating faster than I expected, she said. They're not just spreading rumors. They're actively trying to damage your professional reputation. What do you think I should do? That depends on what you want. Do you want this story told? Because I have to tell you, Dr. Morrison, what you're experiencing is exactly the kind of systemic family abuse that people need to hear about. This isn't just about you. There are thousands of people trapped in similar situations who don't realize they have options. I thought about the Wilson family, crying with gratitude because someone had saved their dog. I thought about all the years I'd convinced myself that my family's treatment was normal, that love always came with conditions, that generosity automatically earned respect. What would the story look like? Catherine pulled up another document. I've already started drafting it. The Hidden Epidemic of Adult-Child Financial Abuse, How Families Weaponize Love to Maintain Control. Your story would be the centerpiece, but I'd include expert interviews, statistics, and profiles of similar cases. Would you use my real name? Only with your permission? But Dr. Morrison, I have to tell you, your family has already made this public by involving me. They invited a journalist to Christmas dinner and then spent the evening discussing your private finances and mental health. The only question now is whether you want to control the narrative or let them continue destroying your reputation unchallenged. My phone was buzzing constantly now. Messages from cousins, family, friends, even my veterinary school classmates. The whisper campaign was in full swing. How long do I have to decide? The story runs in Sunday's edition if you agree. That gives us 3 days to fact-check everything and get additional sources. But Hallie, I don't think you have the luxury of time. They're not going to stop this campaign until they get what they want. As if summoned by her words, my phone rang again. This time, it was my mother. And I could hear voices in the background. They were all together. Hallie, we're at Robert's house, and we need you here now. Dr. Martinez called Robert back and was very rude to him. And now we're even more worried about your mental state. We've talked to Pastor Williams, and he agrees that you need professional help. We found a wonderful residential facility that specializes in work-related trauma. I hung up and immediately called my lawyer, Attorney Sarah Kim, whom I'd contacted the day before. Sarah, they're trying to have me committed. What? Slow down. Hallie, what's happening? I explained the escalating situation while Catherine listened intently, occasionally taking notes. Okay, Sarah said when I finished. First, they can't have you involuntarily committed without a court order, which requires evidence of immediate danger to yourself or others. Second, document everything, every call, every text, every attempt to contact your colleagues or friends. Third, have you considered getting a restraining order? Against my own family? Hallie, what they're doing is harassment. They're attempting to damage your professional reputation and interfere with your ability to earn a living. That's economic abuse, and it's illegal. I looked at Catherine, who was nodding vigorously. There's something else. I told Sarah. A journalist has been investigating their behavior, and she wants to publish a story about family financial abuse using my case as an example. That could be very powerful, Sarah said. Public exposure often stops this kind of behavior faster than legal action alone. Are you comfortable with that level of publicity? I thought about Charlie the golden retriever, wagging his tail after I'd saved his life. I thought about the Wilson family, who'd thanked me with genuine tears because I'd given them back their Christmas. I thought about all the years I'd made myself smaller to accommodate people who saw me as a walking bank account. Yes, I said. I want the story published. Then let's do this right, Sarah said. Catherine, are you there? I'm here. I'm going to send you documentation of the attempted electronic theft, copies of all the harassing messages, and a timeline of the financial exploitation. This needs to be bulletproof. Over the next 2 hours, Catherine and I built the most comprehensive case study I'd ever seen. Bank records showing 8 years of transfers totaling $847 as no screenshots of the attempted account breaches, recordings of voicemails where they admitted their financial dependence, Dr. Martinez's written statement about my professional competence and their inappropriate contact. Most damning of all, Catherine had recorded yesterday's Christmas dinner conversation on her phone. I always record social gatherings, she explained. It's a journalist's habit. I have everything they said about you, including Robert's comment that you're easier to manage when you feel guilty, and Emma's suggestion that they should make her think she needs us more than we need her. Hearing those words, spoken in their own voices, was like being punched in the stomach, but it was also liberating. Finally, I had proof that I wasn't imagining things, that their love had always come with strings attached. "Are you ready to do this?" Catherine asked. I looked around the coffee shop, at the normal families having normal conversations, at people who probably couldn't imagine weaponizing love the way mine had. I thought about my new life waiting in San Diego, about Dr. Sarah Chen, who saw my value without needing to be paid for it. "I'm ready." Catherine hit publish at exactly 3 p.m. on Friday afternoon. The story exploded across social media within hours. Financial family abuse started trending on Twitter. The Seattle Times website crashed from traffic. By evening, I'd received over 200 messages from people sharing their own stories of family financial exploitation. My phone was ringing constantly, but now it wasn't just my family. CNN wanted an interview. Good morning. America was interested in a follow-up story. Dr. Phil's producers left 3 voicemails, but the most important call came at 8 p.m. "Dr. Morrison, this is Detective Amanda Chen with the Seattle Police Department. We've received a complaint about the financial crimes mentioned in today's article. Would you be available to come in and file a formal report?" They called the police on me? "No, ma'am. We're calling about the crimes committed against you. Attempted unauthorized access to financial accounts is a felony in Washington state. If you're willing to prosecute, we'd like to pursue charges." As I hung up the phone, I realized something profound had happened. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't fighting this battle alone. I had allies: Catherine, Sarah Kim, Dr. Martinez, Detective Chen, and hundreds of strangers who'd recognized their own stories in mine. My family had spent 31 years teaching me that I was only valuable for what I could provide, but in trying to destroy me, they'd accidentally revealed the truth. I was strong enough to survive without them, talented enough to build a new life, and brave enough to help others do the same. At 9 p.m., I got one final call that night. "Hallie?" It was Emma, and she was crying. "Please, we never meant for this to happen. The journalist, the story, people are calling us monsters. Robert lost a potential job because someone sent his interviewer the article. Mom's too upset to get out of bed. We're getting death threats." "Emma?" I said quietly. "You had 8 years to treat me with basic human dignity. You had 8 years to say thank you, to include me, to see me as more than a financial resource. Instead, you tried to have me committed when I stopped paying your bills. We love you. We've always loved you." "No, Emma, you loved what I could do for you. There's a difference." "What do we do now?" I looked around my apartment, at the boxes I'd started packing for San Diego, at the Christmas tree that was finally plugged in again. Not because it was Christmas, but because I wanted to see something beautiful. "You learn to take care of yourselves," I said. "You figure out how to live within your means. You get jobs that actually pay your bills. You grow up." "And us? Our relationship?" I was quiet for a long moment, thinking about all the years I'd hoped for their love, all the times I'd convinced myself that maybe this Christmas would be different, maybe this birthday they'd remember, maybe this time they'd see me, maybe someday. I said finally, "But not until you understand what you did wrong, and not until you can love me without needing me to fund that love." I hung up and immediately called Dr. Sarah Chen. "Hallie, I saw the article. Oh my God, are you okay?" I'm perfect, I said, and realized it was true. When did you say you needed me to start? How about next Monday? I have a feeling you're ready for a fresh start. More ready than you know. As I hung up the phone, I felt something I'd never experienced before. Complete, unconditional peace. Not the brittle calm of someone holding everything together, but the deep serenity of someone who'd finally learned that their worth wasn't negotiable. Outside my window, Seattle sparkled in the winter night, and somewhere across the country, San Diego was waiting with sunshine and new possibilities and people who would value me for who I was, not what I could pay for. I was 31 years old, and for the first time in my life, I was free. The story Catherine had written would help thousands of people recognize their own situations and find the courage to choose themselves. The legal case would ensure my family faced consequences for their financial crimes. The new job would give me a fresh start in a place where no one expected me to be smaller than I was. But most importantly, I'd learned the difference between love and transaction, between family and exploitation, between generosity and enabling. Some people are born into families, others have to build them. I was ready to start building, and I finally understood what my therapist had tried to tell me years ago. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away from people who can't love you back the way you deserve. The war was over. I had won, not because I'd destroyed them, but because I'd finally chosen to save myself, and that, I realized, had always been enough. 3 months later, I was sitting on the beach in La Jolla, watching the sunset paint the Pacific Ocean in shades of gold and crimson. My new colleagues at Dr. Chen's practice had become the kind of family I'd always dreamed of. People who celebrated my successes, supported me through difficult cases, and never once asked me to pay for the privilege of belonging. The article had led to a book deal, speaking engagements, and a nonprofit foundation dedicated to helping victims of family financial abuse. I'd received thousands of letters from people who'd recognized their own stories in mine, and many had found the courage to set their own boundaries. My biological family? They'd faced real consequences. Robert was charged with attempted fraud for trying to access my accounts. Emma lost her apartment and had to move back in with Mom, who'd finally gotten a job at a local grocery store. Marcus, faced with the reality of supporting himself without my subsidies, had moved on to find another family to manipulate. They'd tried to contact me a few times, always when they needed something. But I'd learned to recognize the difference between love and transaction, and I no longer confused the two. As I watched the waves roll in, I thought about a text I'd received that morning from Mrs. Wilson. Charlie was doing great, and their family had adopted another rescue dog. They'd named him Courage. Perfect, I thought, smiling as the last light faded from the sky. Sometimes courage looks like standing up to bullies or facing down impossible odds. But sometimes, courage looks like a woman sitting alone in an apartment on a rainy December night, finally choosing to save herself. And that, I'd learned, was the most beautiful kind of courage of all.